Hi, I'm Vladimir Valletta of the Mystic Underground. I sing in the band and write the lyrics. We just put out a new record called Wrapped in Riddles.
When people get desperate, the knives come out. The fixer is looking, is skulking about.
So, are you guys self-taught, or were you guys formally trained as musicians?
Well, yeah, I'll start. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, but I only took piano lessons for like a year and a half. And I just didn't like it at first. But then, I went to the store one day and I saw a electronic keyboard and I'm like, ooh, those things are cool. I like how, they played the drums and they played the bass and they had all these different sounds. And so I'm like, oh, Dad, I want to get one of those for Christmas. So he bought me one for Christmas. And ever since then, I've been absolutely hooked, with keyboards. I pretty much, took what I learned. And my father was a musician too. So he, taught me some additional stuff and I would play with him sometimes, and that's basically how I got into this. It was just the love for electronic sounds and the keyboard.
Yeah, I didn't do any of that. No, seriously, for me, I'm completely self-taught. I was one of those kids who literally would watch music video shows on television and wanted to emulate what I saw. The whole idea of being in like this alternate reality where everything was glamorous, everything was just debonair. I wanted to be a part of that, to escape from the current reality that was inhabiting. So for me, it was essentially taking what I saw on television and trying to, put myself in that. And I would literally just spend afternoons with a hairbrush singing in front of the mirror and trying as best as I could to replicate the voices. Like, I always said that my first vocal teachers were Morrissey, David Bowie, and Brett Anderson from Suede. And I would just continually try to, and Andy Bell from Erasure, that's a big one, that I would just continuously try to replicate the way they sang, the charisma that they exhibited, and in Andy Bell's case, try to hit the high notes that he did. I failed often. It took me a very long time to even come close to replicate the high note in A Little Respect before I finally started nailing it. And that's when I realized I had arrived. So.
Cool. So what do you guys appreciate and love about each other?
Hey, yo.
I mean, I'll go first. Yeah. I think that we work well together, you know what I mean? We all have our defined roles, you know what I mean? And I think because we have the defined roles, we just stick to them. I stick to the music and the production, the mixing, stuff like that. He sticks to the lyrics, he sticks to the singing, and we'll input, on either side during the whole process. But I think because we have the assigned roles, that's why it works, We've tried to bring in other members of the band, and I think maybe Daniel was a success a few years ago because his role was just to play guitar. But we've had some other members join, and their roles weren't defined, and it just didn't work. You know what I mean? But just with me and him, it just clicks and works.
No, but yeah, we that's exactly why we work well together. We're different personalities, which also tends to help. We look at music in somewhat different ways, but at the same time, very similar ways, which helps. Even down to the type of music that we listen to. We incorporate those influences into what we do as the Mystic Underground.
Let's imagine this is pre-COVID and one of your fans had to come to New York. What would you guys show them of New York? Let me rephrase this question in a better way. When you guys hang out, what do you guys like to do together in your city?
I don't know. I think me and Vlad have different, tastes, but, sometimes, like if I go to Brooklyn, where Vlad lives, he likes to visit, certain places like a diner that has been, the Kellogg's Diner, which I'm not even sure if that's open anymore.
It's still open. Yeah, they're in danger though.
The what's that burger joint right on the corner by
Action Burger?
Action Burger that has a whole bunch of arcades inside the joint that he shows me when I'm there, and then I think Barcade he brought me to once.
Yep.
But Brooklyn is like so much different than Manhattan. When I go into Manhattan, I'll visit Central Park or Times Square, the typical touristy spots. If a fan visited New York, I love the beach, and Port Jefferson and Montauk and Greenport and Smith Point, stuff like that, Long Beach.
Yeah, so once Ben takes them to all the touristy spots, I'll bring them into spots like, I bring them to a lot of like urban historical spots. Because one thing New York's known for is a lot of the concert venues, a lot of the museums, and just like stuff that's out of the way, that most people don't know about. Like Tompkins Square Park, I'd spend some time down at St. Mark's Place, which is a nice little corridor in Manhattan. In Brooklyn, Domino Park, the East River State Park, the parks that are accessible these days.
So did you guys study anything? I mean, you said you met in college.
Yeah, I studied business administration and information technology. And obviously, that's not music in any way, shape, or form, but that's the direction I was going for anyway. And, it's one of those things like, I didn't know at the time when I was first applying to college that I was even going to be doing this, because I wasn't even in a band at that age. I wasn't a cover band when I was 18, very shortly. But I never even thought of taking this to this level, when I was that age. I did later on go to Recording Engineers Institute, and I became a certified audio engineer, just because, we were mixing our own stuff, and whenever we would mix our own stuff, it just wouldn't come out right. So I decided, let me just take the matters into my own hands. So I went to that school, and after I graduated, our stuff was coming out a lot better, and rather than spend, thousands and thousands of dollars to go to a studio.
10 hours on a cowbell.
Exactly. So it was just thousands and thousands of dollars on an audio school, but that's just a one-time thing. and it worked out. The stuff's coming out really good now. Right, Vlad?
Yeah. Oh, no, I would wholeheartedly concur. I went to school initially for finance because I dreamed that I'd be the next Gordon Gekko after seeing Wall Street for the first time. And then I realized I just didn't like it, and the whole hedge fund thing, it's just something that wasn't me. And there was a part of me that still felt like I had to do something responsible. So instead of going to school to pursue music, I ended up going to school majoring in European history. European history with the minor in linguistics. So, that takes you very far in life. So, so I did that. But my heart was always in music. So while I was in school, every waking moment I had, I was writing something, some type of lyrics. So you could say I had my second minor in music.
And you would sing a cappella.
Oh, God,
in college, and that's how we met.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that part. Started off singing a cappella before I met Ben, just at random places like these workshops where you basically had acoustic guitarists, perform their stuff for people, stuff they wrote. It was just like a round table. And I just wanted to do something to get me, to dip my feet into the pool. So I would just go there and understand, like I mentioned before, I don't play anything. So I just literally went there with printed out lyrics and I just started singing. And people are looking around like, wow, this is off the beaten path. Like, all right. But I guess they respected the fact that I had the conviction and the audacity to do that. So, eventually with that I gained confidence, and then I met Ben, and we started up, and we started performing these live open mics at a coffee house. that that's how we got our start. And then slowly but surely we gained confidence as a live outfit, and then the rest is history.
What were some of the biggest obstacles you guys faced when you started out?
I mean, I think the biggest obstacles were trying to get our recorded stuff to sound professional. I think all of our songs in the beginning, writing-wise, were pretty good. It's just we couldn't get it to sound right, recorded, because I was just I used Cubase, and I was just like in the dark, how to use it, how to mix, and just the stuff just was not there, and even us having it mastered professionally still didn't do the job, because if you mix, it sounds like crap, your master's gonna sound like crap. So I think that was our biggest obstacle in the beginning.
Yeah, that's definitely a major obstacle. I'm very critical of a lot of the stuff I do. So for me, my biggest obstacle was confidence in what I was saying lyrically and the direction I wanted to go with the music and everything. And I would say another major obstacle would just have been us getting out there from a live standpoint, because early on, it was difficult to find shows because we were, for the most part, the only group doing what we were doing. So you'd encounter people looking at you, because we'd play like these 7-band, 6-band, and bills, and we were literally the only thing remotely close to being an electronic band.
Oh yeah.
We'd play with cover bands, we'd play with just hard rock bands, and then up we go, middle of the bill. Ben setting up these basic keyboards, me up there just feeling about the microphone stand. People are just like, okay. And then once we start playing, you hear, like beats coming out, and other people are like, what? And, and so, some people out of curiosity would watch and be like, oh, okay, this is cool. And you'd have other people just horrified and aghast at us. And it was definitely interesting. But, those are kind of the trials that you go through when you're starting out and before you find your niche in your audience. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't frustrating at the time, and to the point where it's nearly deflating. But, I'm sure you're going to have horror stories from every band when it comes to that. So.
Okay, let's talk a little about perception and marketing. I mean, you guys sound amazing. When we look at your social media imprints, it's like you don't have that much of a following. Why do you think that is?
Why? I really don't know. I always say maybe, it could be because we're not mainstream enough. Maybe we don't have a big of a reach. It could be so many different reasons, but we can't really pinpoint what the reason could be. I always say that, in this industry, you need to know somebody and have some luck, to kind of make it. And maybe we just haven't found that yet.
It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. It's hard to say. The best you can do is work with the things that are within your control, which is write songs that are as good as can be. Write songs that people will hopefully gravitate to. And then once you do that, then the work begins. I mean, the hard work is writing the songs, because it starts with the song. But then it's like what you learn is just like, okay, that was just like the footprint. Now it's actually the work of getting it out there and getting it out to people with, and getting a foothold in terms of the overall marketplace. And it's hard to say. I mean, maybe we don't write the type of songs that are immediately accessible to a majority of people. I've always thought that we were kind of always like in that middle ground in terms of in terms of our sound. We're almost like too pop for the dark music scene, but we're too dark for a lot of pop music fans. And it's a space that I actually don't necessarily mind inhabiting, but at the same time, it's kind of like a lonely place, because, in anything these days, you have to pick a side. And if you pick a side, you're going to have your detractors who are going to bring you down no matter what. So with us, it's just a matter of just being comfortable living in the periphery, the margins, and then just hoping that we're putting out music that would favor itself with those types of listeners that do want to find music there, that, say something, that don't necessarily just subscribe or follow some type of musical dogma. It's like, because we're all over the place, and that's fine by me.
But do you also think, being in America, that perhaps the scene or the people you should be connecting with are perhaps the European countries?
Yeah, no, there's definitely something to that, because the reality is that the backbone of our scene is, does lie in places like the UK, Germany, places such as that. I mean, that's undeniable. And like I was mentioning before, there are pockets or enclaves of scenes happening in the States, but they're so separate. And I don't know how much they communicate with each other in terms of actually fostering a global scene. It's more like, the Tampa scene, the LA scene, the New York goth scene. And we all know each other, but in terms of actually creating something universal, I don't know if we're there yet. I could be wrong, but it just seems that there's still work to be done. But I think that's in the terms of the dark music scene in general. It's like, I think a lot of us, and a lot of it's COVID related right now, because there's not a lot to be done. Everyone's sort of like scratching for answers. Like we were talking about earlier, it's like you have the live stream things happening, but and everyone's doing their best, Twitch DJs, things of that nature. But I guess I would say there's more work to be done on that front in terms of fostering and cultivating a scene in general, where bands of every stripe can feel like they have a little piece of it.
On that note, I actually kind of want to disagree with you. I think that you guys do fit perfectly in the whole EBM industrial future pop scene. And the reason being is that you got bands like Baborn Baton, you've got And One, you've got VNV Nation, you've got all these other bands that are super poppy, maybe even more so, and more digestible, because your music is very written. Like it's a lot to take in, like very quickly. You know what I mean? So I think that's maybe the thing that comes to mind for me, is that it's super musical. I mean, I can only imagine how hard it is to write lyrics to some of those tracks.
Oh, it is, Ben.
Yeah, well, I mean, because the way that we write is, because we're when we get together, it's just basically the practice, for gigs. But we write separate. So I'll write the music track first, and then I'll send the MP3 file to Vlad, and he'll put lyrics to it. You know what I mean? And then, depending on the circumstance, sometimes when we practice for the first time, I'll be hearing the lyrics for the first time, while practicing, and then we'll kind of like do some final touches, and then we'll start recording. You know what I mean? But when I'm recording, I'm doing everything here on my own. And then, as I'm mixing and adding some elements, I'll send them to Vlad. Vlad says, "Oh, I like this, but I don't like this," and then we'll just go back and forth until we come across, a finished product. Whether it's, 3 takes or 20 takes, eventually it'll get done.
Yep.
So what was your first studio setup like, and how has it changed to what it currently is now?
So my first studio set was just basically a keyboard and a computer that I hooked up just to do basic MIDI. You know what I mean? And then it evolved from there. Then I got into Cubase, started learning Cubase, started, transferring MIDI tracks to audio, starting to learn about mixing, and then the computing power basically dictated how good the stuff got, obviously along with my education, because I was using Windows XP back in the day, and there was only so much that computer could do, when you're adding effects to Cubase, if you add like 3 or 4 effects, the CPU is already maxing out. So we kind of had to find I had to find a compromise. You know what I mean? All right, so I can't put the effect on that one. Maybe I can do something else or whatever. And then now I have, an 8-core computer that's so powerful that, no matter how many effects I'm putting on it, it's still only maxing out at 18% on the CPU power. So it's like, now I have this unlimited power, and I think, and I just got this computer last year. So this album, I think, came out really good just because of the amount of computing power I have. Amongst other things, because I was also using Cubase SX3, which was an older one for the last album. And now I'm using Cubase 10.5, which is just so much more powerful.
Into analog gear, or is it all software based?
I'm into a lot of, not analog, it's basically, like, I'll give you an example. So, you know the song Bushwick Girls on the album that we have now?
Sure.
So I already have it set up just in case you were going to ask me this question, but I wrote that song on this. That's my iPad, and then I use an app called Core Gadget. And let's see if I don't know if you're going to hear it, but I'll just play a quick part. You hear it?
Yeah.
So I wrote that song on the Core Gadget. Then I sent that track to Vlad. Vlad put lyrics to it. He went to the studio, recorded the lyrics, sent them to me, and then I took all of the audio from the Core Gadget and I stuck it into Cubase. And then I took it from there. So I started adding effects. I started adding soft synths from Cubase in there and just built it up from there. And that's just one of the methods. Another method would be, using a regular keyboard. This is the Roland FA06, which I actually just got 2 weeks ago. But I had.
That's a nice little plug for Roland.
Yep, I used the Roland Phantom X for a lot of our last album. Prior to St. Mark's is the Roland Phantom X. Those Evil Urges is the Roland Phantom X. The majority of this album was the Core Gadget. That's a hard question to answer. I would just say that the highlight would be anytime we perform and or release something and get a good reaction. You know what I mean? I remember years ago we performed. I forgot the name of the place. We performed our set, and most of the people. Some people were listening, some people weren't. And then we performed our last song, "Remember Me." And when we hit the bridge of that song, and right after the bridge was done, and Vlad started singing again, everybody got up and walked toward the front of the stage. I don't know if you remember that, Vlad.
Yes, I do.
And that was so surprising to me. I'm like, we just played a whole entire set, and now we're finishing up "Remember Me," and now everybody's getting up and looking. And then that was the last song of the set, and then when we were done, people were like, more.
Yeah. Like, we were up for like 40 minutes.
So, it's reactions like that, like, oh wow, we're actually getting people's attention here. And everybody came up and started, going to the front of the stage and listening to what we were playing. Stuff like that is I would say, the highlight.
And that would be, except for music, what other interests and hobbies do you have?
Oof. Not much else, really. I mean, I like watching movies. I like taking sometimes some GoPro video. I mean, sometimes if I have time, sometimes I'll grab the old, I got like an old Nintendo or a Sega Genesis emulator, and I'll play that.
The Mystic Underground, it's been great talking. I want to thank you guys for your time.
Oh, thank you for having us.
We've been, this is actually our third record. We had two prior to this. But this is probably the one that we feel the most comfortable with in terms of just realizing the collective vision of the band between Ben and myself. I would also dare say it's probably our poppiest record, which was sort of by design, but not really. I guess it's just a matter of finally getting everything that we saw in the band in terms of, again, our collective vision, and finally putting that together with actually being able to record and mix everything relatively better than we did previously. And generally an increase in confidence in terms of our songwriting. I can definitely say that for me. Because lyrics are always tough. I'm sure you're going to hear that from every lyricist, that lyrics are difficult to write because it comes down to how you're feeling at that particular time, the inspiration that you feel at that time, your general headspace, and your mental health. I guess this time I just focus more on the technical aspect instead of focusing so much on just the general idea. I allowed myself the sort of headroom and the breathing space to realize, like, if I didn't like a line, let it go, let the song sit and come back to it. If it takes a week, fine. If it takes a month, fine. Because ordinarily, I would sit there and stare at a blank piece of paper or look at my computer screen and just try to like fit something in there. And it, you know, to middling effect, in my opinion. This time, I would basically, like I said, push everything aside, come back to it, and if it worked then, it worked. If I got a phrase, wrote it down. If I had a line, wrote it down. If I was lucky, got an entire chorus. Brilliant. But there are songs on this record that it took me easily 2 months to write. Whereas usually it would take me maybe 2 hours. If it takes a week, fine. If it takes a couple weeks, fine. And I have to say, lyrically, I'm very happy with the record on my end. So that definitely helps.
So you guys have been together for what? Over a decade now. What have been the highlights for you?
The highlights for us so far have basically been the amount of airplay we've gotten steadily over the years. Internet radio, college radio. You know, we've had, you know, people come up to me or Ben on the street and actually recognize us, which is always nice. And then bands that actually say that, you know, cite us as an influence, which is always something that kind of throws you for a spin because you're just like, it's like, wow, people actually listen. And then now for bands to actually sort of incorporate what we do into what they do, it's kind of weird, but it's you know, it's incredibly humbling and incredibly we're incredibly honored by that, but it's not something that you tend to get used to at all. But here we are.
What can you tell me about the scene in the States? I can't actually imagine there being a big synth pop scene in the States.
It's weird because, I mean, I guess it speaks to a larger thing where it's just like people tend to deny the influence of electronic music in the grand scheme of things, where, you know, you think in 2020 we're past that, you know, because electronic music, you know, encompasses every aspect of music culture. But to your point, the synth pop scene, I don't know how big it is because it's kind of the bastard cousin to like the goth and industrial scene. It's like the scene that no one wants to talk about, but yet in their secret moments in their rooms, they're listening to stuff like Erasure, the Pet Shop Boys and stuff like that. But outside, it's like they're in the clubs and they're listening to, you know, Bauhaus for like the 50 millionth time, you know, stuff like that. That said, it's a small scene, but it's getting bigger. Because I have noticed that in pockets, like say in Florida or LA, there are nights and there's a groundswell of bands that are coming out of those areas. New York to a lesser degree, but there are some in New York. I mean, I can list them. There are some great bands, but it's a growing scene. It's a small scene, but it's a growing scene. I think as a lot of bands mature and almost just find their way into writing songs, you know, I think you're starting to see a lot more bands, because I always equate it to like the punk scene in the 70s, late 70s, where it's just like everyone wanted to be a punk band because the idea was just like you didn't need to know how to play anything, you just went out there and played. And then eventually you learned how to write songs by just playing, so that turned into the new wave scene. So you had all those bands that just became great songwriters. And I'm starting to see that now. To the same degree. And obviously now with COVID, it's kind of hard to tell where the scene is right now because none of us are playing. We're all basically just sitting home, either working or futzing about. Some people are doing live streams. Some people are just watching. I mean, we'd love to do a live stream, but we're still in the process of trying to figure that out in terms of how we're going to how we're going to set it up. But we take pride in playing, so that's killing us right now. So.
But yes, like you said, maybe it's a new chapter where you guys can come up with some kind of interesting live show. I don't know if you're familiar with V&V Nation, but they recently did a paid live stream, and it actually it was quite popular, and I think they made quite a lot of money from it.
Huh. Yeah, definitely. We're definitely familiar with V&V. Love Ronan Harris and all his work. I mean, been fans since Advance and Follow, first record. Yeah, so. But yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that's obviously probably the new frontier. Even when we're past COVID, I think you're going to see a lot of that, where bands are just going to say, you know what, we're not going to deal with concert promoters that take money from our pockets. We're not going to deal with the drama and just the drama of booking shows. Especially with right now, we don't even know what the true fallout of COVID is with respect to the music industry, because you're starting to see how venues are closing. We don't know how many of them are actually still too close because they don't have enough time to recoup after COVID. So it's a dire time for a lot of artists. So it's like, yeah, the live stream thing is probably going to be the default mechanism for a lot of us going forward, at least for the next year.
So I've heard a lot of interesting things about there being a mass exodus from New York. Have you seen or experienced anything like that?
There's a bit of that, but I discussed it with a few friends when we joke about it, and it's like, yeah, there is an exodus, but I think if anything, a lot of those people are people who are going to leave anyway. Because the thing with New York is it's a very transient area. I'm a native, but it's a very transient thing where people come here and with the ideal of falling into the trap of like New York, the Frank Sinatra song, thinking they're going to come here, make it, and then like it's like a Cinderella story, but they don't realize that it's difficult to live in New York. It's expensive, and you do have to work. And I think oftentimes what you're seeing with a lot of people is they moved here, they didn't achieve what they wanted to, and then they basically decide to give up and go back to where they came from and live the lives that they wanted to escape by coming to New York. So it's very weird. And as a native, I just look at that and I shake my head because I'm just like, what did you think was going to happen? And from that, and that's something that I usually tend to like writing about. And any type of politics, gender, sexual, class, anything like that, sociopolitical, that's something I'm into. I know a song that got me for a while was a song called Regression to the Mean, because when Ben first said the song, I just thought, wow, this is probably the poppiest thing Ben's written in a very long time. And usually with a lot of songs, Ben usually writes from like a pop music mind, and I turn around and let the goth in me go in and just make it so melodramatic, make it the most dour song possible. And I think that kind of clash works with us, but this one I was like, all right, let me have some fun with this song. So I actually wrote intentionally pop lyrics to it, but then I realized, wow, do I even know how to write a pop song? So I did the best I could, and but it just, I guess I had to fight myself in terms of trying to go too obtuse, too pretentious with the lyrics, and just stick to basics and just say what I need to say, stick to a general idea, and then bang it out. And that song took me a couple of weeks to write, but it's one of my favorite songs on the record. So
how did you meet Ben?
Ben and I met through, we were in college, and Ben and I met through a girl named Gigi, who was a good friend of mine. I was looking to start something because I finally decided, like, all right, I wanted to get serious about music and everything. And I had a couple of dalliances with a couple of bands and everything. It didn't work out, or the vibe wasn't right. And I had told her, and I was lamenting that, the fact that I was just kind of getting frustrated at the fact that I couldn't find anything yet. And she mentioned to me, said, oh, well, she knows a guy who likes making music with keyboards and computers, and that suddenly piqued my interest. Like, whoa, really? And she's like, yeah. And within a week, she invited him to come to the library where I met him, and we just started talking, and we hit it off. And, and the rest is history. And incidentally, that girl Gigi is now his wife.
Ah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Except for music, what other hobbies and interests do you have?
Personally, I'm a massive sports nut. As any of my friends know, I'm a big time jock, which is weird for a lot of musicians because you don't find that, but I'm a major sports nut. I'm a fan of the four major sports in the United States. So that would be ice hockey, baseball, American football, and basketball. So, and for all four, I'm a supporter of all four of the New York teams. Aside from sports, I'm very into movies. Books, I have to admit, I have a major backlog on books right now because I'm a big reader, but I haven't read anything in a while because I've just fallen short on my responsibilities to myself to read. But my favorite authors are Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club, Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote American Psycho, Less Than Zero, and a man called Jonathan Lethem. He wrote the book Motherless Brooklyn, which just became a movie last year. As far as film is concerned, I'm actually typically a fan of franchise movies. Like I'm big time into like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so I'm a total geek for that stuff. I'm also a big time James Bond fan. In fact, I'm currently in the middle of a rewatch of all the movies because I have them all on DVD. I also grew up on the Brat Pack movies, like all the John Hughes films, like all those teen drama movies, like The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, things like that. And I love those films. I'm also big into certain directors like Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, things like that. I love all their films. I'm into weightlifting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a big time gym rat. If I'm not home, I'm usually at the gym.
So what are you listening to currently?
A lot of stuff I'm really digging at the moment. The new record by the band Linnea Aspera is absolutely top notch. They're from England, really good. They're like kind of a dark cold wave type sound. Really cool. Very intelligent lyrics, off the beaten path. Very into like. It's hard to describe them, but they're just so articulate and eloquent. They're just amazing. But it's this mix of like almost like philosophical with a very cold musical backdrop, and her voice is just otherworldly. So and that just gravitates to me. Who else is there? I'm a big fan of a band I consider a kindred spirits. They're called The Dossier. They're another synth band from New York, and they're just amazing. They just put out a new single called "Get Out of My Way," which is just fantastic.
Yeah, I saw the video. It's pretty cool.
Oh, you saw it? Yeah. They're great guys, and they're just really good. Favorite band of all time is the Smiths. So every once in a while, I'm always going to pop them in. David Bowie. The new album by Boot Blacks is great. This band out of London called Spectre. They're probably my favorite of the bands that have come out in the last few years. Again, very witty lyrics, and the music's solid. I mean, the lead singer, Fred McPherson, I think is the best lyricist to come down the pike in the last 10 years, easily.
So what is your advice to up-and-coming bands and producers and singers?
My advice is basically to understand the reality that you currently inhabit and then say, screw it. Do it. You only live once. Yes, you're going to hear all the negative stories about the music industry. You're going to feel inadequate because you only have 200 likes on your Facebook page, or where you have bands that you think you're better than have 20,000. Doesn't matter. Just do it, because you have something to say. Go out and say it. Now in 2020, there's nothing stopping anybody, a producer, a singer, a band, from going out there, honing their craft and working at it and putting stuff up and, gaining a following. You know what I mean? 20 years ago, 30 years ago, yeah, it might have been tough because, you had to hope that you lucked into an A&R scout dropping by that out of the way pub somewhere, and they just happened to hear you. It was like, yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. They're sitting there basically looking at blogs and looking at your algorithms, but just play. Write the best songs you possibly can, and then write the next best song you possibly can, and keep trying to top your stuff, because that's how you're going to get better. That's how you develop confidence, and that's how you refine your voice. Producers, keep making beats. Without being completely crass, it's like the drug game. Give away some freebies, because there's always going to be a singer, there's always going to be a band that wants help with the beat, that wants help with direction. Just keep putting stuff out there, and you will find someone that you can collaborate with. Hey, become a band with, and just work. Never stop working. Never stop getting better. Never stop writing, and just never stop being a musician. Never stop being an artist. Never silence your own voice, because there's too many factors. There's too many people out there trying to do it. And if you do it to yourself, then what's the point?
Yeah, ending off, is there anything else you'd like to add or anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I would say thank you to everyone who's listening to the record. If you haven't, why haven't you? No, but seriously, I would thank everyone for listening to the record. The feedback we've gotten thus far has been overwhelming. It's been great. And hopefully we'll see you at a show sooner than later.
Vladimir, I want to thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really nice chatting. Cheers, bye.
Cheers.